Hey everybody, do you get really irritated when you see price increases? You think corporate America is trying to take advantage of you? Get irritated when you see the price of eggs doubling or see a gallon of gas at $4? How about a cup of coffee? $3.50? It almost costs as much to buy a cup of coffee as it does a gallon of gas. Ridiculous. Well, today we're going to dive into what's really behind the scenes as it relates to price increases and what some people call price gouging. In today's video, I'll give you real examples of how the media misleads you and how they create a lot of fear-mongering instead of coming up with solutions to problems or helping average Americans figure out how to save the most. And if you stick around, I'll show you some of the things you can do to save money when you're out shopping. All right, so let's get into it. I want to start this video off by highlighting something I heard through a third media outlet, not from the source, but it had to do with The View and Whoopi Goldberg and something she said about business owners, basically grocery store chains. She called grocery store chain owners pigs, flat out offensive. I couldn't believe it when I heard it. I thought to myself, we rely on these grocery stores to survive. I mean, in some communities, a Dollar Tree store is the only place they have to go and grocery shop. And you're sitting there calling them pigs because they're price gouging? This is absurd. Then that was followed up with a different news article, or I suppose radio article that I heard, where a guy was talking about how the grocery store chains are up 50% in profit this year. Again, absolutely ridiculous. Partial information. If you don't have the whole story, you can't make the proper judgments. So let's dive into those two things. First off, Whoopi was talking about how grocery store owners are pigs because they're making so much profit and they're price gouging. That's absolutely absurd. I mean, I don't know if you guys know how much profit the average grocery store makes, whether it's a small or a large, but it ranges between 1 and 3%. 1 and 3%. Just think about that. So for every $100,000 in volume, they're making $1,000 to $3,000 in profit. That's ridiculous. You have to drive a ton of volume to make a profit. So obviously grocery stores by and large are not price gouging. Now let's talk about this reference to profit. Well, again, you have to have the information. Profit is relative, right? If you drive a lot of volume, let's use gas stations, for example. Gas stations make somewhere between, I don't know, 2 and 3 cents a gallon. Can you imagine that? 2 to 3 cents a gallon in profit. Where most gas stations make their money is in the little sundries, right? The foundry items that you find, like candy bars and chips and drinks and things like that. That's why they're generally a little more expensive. You pull off to get gas, and then they're going to get you with some of the knickknacks that you buy while you're in there, maybe even a souvenir or something like that. And oftentimes gas stations that are located close to freeways, real quick, easy stopping points, are going to be even higher than gas stations that are in more rural areas or inside town. But the average amount of profit made per gallon is like 1 to 3 cents, give or take. So again, this whole gas gouging or price gouging is absolutely insane. Now, you can save money on gas by, as I stated earlier, going into the interiors or going to mass merchants, or even I'll give you some other tips on how to save. But they're not price gouging you, folks. They're not price gouging you. You have to shop. And I'm going to give you some statistics that completely debunk that. But let's talk about that guy said. The guy said their profit margins in grocery was up 50%. So we'll get off gas for a second. What he meant was, in general, right, because prices went up somewhere between 25 and 30%, the overall profit went up. So if you had let's say 2 dozen eggs that you sold for $2 and now they're $4, well, yeah, your profit technically doubled, but the margin of that profit didn't double. Remember, if the profit went up, well, the cost also went up underneath it. It's not like grocery stores just went out and started raising their prices 30, 40, 50 cents. I want you to think about what goes into a grocery store, right? Think about the agricultural aspect of it. Think about the farmers, right? Think about all the materials that they have to put into dealing with the soil and the chemicals that they have to spray to keep pesticides out. Even organic farmers have a tremendous amount of cost, right? You have a lot of overhead. There's taxes, there's cost of business, there's overhead in general, like not just employees, but the electric bill, the water bill, et cetera, et cetera. Oftentimes governments are subsidizing all the way down the waterfall of the grocery chain supply, right? So when they sit there and talk about price gouging, they blame the grocery stores as if they're sitting there making these massive profits, and they're not, right? Oftentimes, even with large corporations, CEOs, they're being paid a ton of money at the very top, but it's because of the volume below them. So if you look at like Exxon Valdez or some of these big oil companies, right, BP, some of these people are making a ton of money at the top, and even the oil companies by and large are making billions in profit, but they're making a fraction per gallon. And you guys have to understand too, there is a tremendous amount of cost that goes into the permitting. Sometimes it could take 10 years and thousands of wasted drill holes and manpower just to find that oil, right? So again, you got to educate yourself on where the cost actually is and how it relates to the price increases and these supply and demand issues. Think about it. If the farmer has to pay more for the tires that are going on his tractor or more for the maintenance guy because of inflation and supply and demand issues, well, obviously that's going to be passed on and everything is going to go up, right? The challenge is that wages have not gone up generally with this inflation. And it happened so fast after COVID that many of the companies couldn't absorb the cost of raising wages the way that maybe perhaps they could have. Think about it. If you double the wages and the cost of goods has gone up, but the profit has not gone up, you go out of business, right? And what happens if 80% of our small businesses go out of business? Well, now you have a handful of people controlling everything, which could obviously increase prices inevitably. So something to consider. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about the average cost of a dozen eggs. Okay, the average cost of a dozen eggs is $3 nationwide. Okay, but if you shop just 3 different stores, you'll find Target is just over $2 for a dozen eggs. You'll find that Walmart is $3.66 for a dozen eggs, and Trader Joe's comes in at like $4.20 for a dozen eggs. That's almost a 100% increase from just these 3 examples I saw. Why is that? Well, Trader Joe's boasts about organic and cage-free eggs, but you're finding those everywhere now, right? So you try to say to yourself, well, why would they be more? Well, maybe their overhead is higher. Maybe they don't have the cost averaging savings with the scale of, say, a Walmart or a Target, perhaps. Either way, you got to do your homework. That's the point. Do your homework. Don't complain about it. Do your homework. I mean, $2 for a dozen eggs, that's insane, okay? Those chickens go through hell to put those eggs out. And at $2 from chicken all the way to production to your plate, that's a pretty damn incredible value regardless of how high they've gone up. Now, let's talk about the national average cost of gas per gallon. The national average cost of gas per gallon is, again, just over $3 at $3.09 the time I'm producing this video. Colorado's average gallon price is $3.12, and Washington State's is $4.04, right? So you're looking at least a 33% increase, right, from the first state to Washington State. Why is that? Well, there's many reasons. Most of it relates to taxes. What's interesting is it's not like you got a pile of oil refineries producing gas in Colorado. So why is Colorado less than 2 coastal states, basically, right? Where there's refiners that are accessible, actually where there's refineries in those states. Seems kind of crazy, right? Well, that's why you have to understand the economics below the retail level. Now, who has the lowest gas taxes? The lowest gas taxes are Alaska and Hawaii. I believe Mississippi also has the lowest gas taxes. Well, the top 3, let's say. And those range anywhere from 9 cents to 19 cents a gallon. That's the lowest taxes in the country, okay? Now, who has the highest gas taxes? Well, there's 3, but 2 of them, California and Washington. California is almost 70 cents a gallon, and Washington is just over 50 cents a gallon. So think about that. If a gallon of gas on average, well, let's just use Washington State, for example, was $4 a gallon, and the taxes are 50 cents, think about how much you could save if we just weren't being taxed to death. If you go just right over the border to Idaho, it's about 40 to 45 cents a gallon less. That's mostly because of the taxes, not because of price gouging. So again, you got to understand where your dollars are going. Now, you could argue, well, those tax dollars are going to improve the climate, or they're going to handle homelessness, or they're going to fix roads. But every state with crazy taxes has all kinds of issues. I mean, look at California. You're going to tell me they've solved their homeless crisis? You're going to tell me that they don't have any emissions or don't have any problems, and that all those tax dollars being generated, probably hundreds of millions of dollars, are going to where they say they are? If you dig into where your tax dollars are going, you might be shocked at how there's all these buckets of slush funds where these monies can be diverted to wherever they want, not to actually what you vote on. And some of these things are even passed without voters, like in the state of Washington. They passed a carbon gas tax that was supposed to penalize businesses for putting too much carbon in the air, and it's made all this money, and that all that money was going to very specific programs, and it hasn't. It's sitting in slush funds that go over to things like bridges to nowhere. And that's perfectly fine, guys, if you're down with that thing, but you need to understand what goes on below the retail level, because this is not all the retailer's fault. In most cases, it's not the retailer's fault at all. It's government and taxation. As a matter of fact, most governments actually subsidize agricultural, energy sectors, some housing, and even healthcare. So they have some degree of control over how successful or if these businesses fail in general, but they can't control what kind of economic conditions affect those businesses, like obviously inflation and or recessionary issues. You may not know this, but the average small business owner makes just $70,000 a year. That's not too far above the average national wage for an individual. And 39% of small business owners say they work 60 plus hours a week. Executives tend to work even longer hours. All right, so as promised, I told you I'd share some ways that you can save money. And here's some of the things you can do. First of all, you have to shop around. And it really starts with you as an individual and not utilizing the blame game, right? Don't blame other people for your problems. Don't blame companies for inflation. Don't blame all your economic woes on the government. You have to look deep inside, right? Are you buying the $3 coffees? Are you eating fast food all the time? Are you making your meals at home? Are you looking at how you spend and trying to cut back as much as you can? Are you maybe starting a side gig where you can make a little extra money to get through those times? Because just like business, we all go through highs and lows with the recessions, and we have to adjust accordingly. The average American has less than $500 in their savings account, so you could barely handle an emergency. Well, we really got to look deep inside and think about that. How am I living my life? Even the average person, let's say below average person as far as wages is concerned, maybe making 30 or 40,000 a year, how are they going to handle an event that might affect their lives significantly? You have to save. You have to look at your spending. You have to measure those things, right? So it starts with slowing down, not listening to the media, and not blaming everybody else for your problems. Here's what you can do. So regarding gas, you can get yourself a membership to a place like Costco or Sam's Club, or even actually having a phone number with Safeway or Fred Meyer, wherever you're buying your groceries. You can save, and you can save anywhere from sometimes 10 to 50 cents a gallon by being loyal to those specific businesses. I know firsthand experience, Costco saves me a lot of money on gas, and I spend like $100 a year on my executive membership, but I also buy a lot of groceries there and get a rebate, so it actually pays for itself. It works out great. The other thing you might do is if you live in an area where you have, let's say, a tribal-owned gas station, so Native Americans are exempt from a lot of the taxation that put a burden on our gas, right? So if you live around a Native American or tribal gas station or casino that has a gas station, check the gas prices, because you might find that you could save somewhere between 30 and 50 cents per gallon by buying gas there. I used to drive around as a sales rep, and it took me, I don't even know, 15 years before I realized that the native-owned gas stations were substantially less cost per gallon. I mean, I can't even tell you, at the time, I was probably spending $400 to $600 a month in gas. I would have saved thousands of dollars had I known that. And this was before I even had a Costco membership. So you need to do your homework. Same thing with groceries, right? Go online, shop around. You could also buy in bulk, right? So you could go to places like Winco or Food for Less and buy bulk, buy dry goods. You might find that buying oatmeal at Walmart versus buying oatmeal at Target versus buying oatmeal at a Winco, those are some of the grocery stores we have here, you could save anywhere from 20 to 30% per pound on that stuff. And you could use coupons. That's another great way to save. And last but not least, if you want to save on eggs, raise your own chickens. Although I would caution you, it's kind of a dirty business. It's not always easy to raise chickens. And while you might think they're cute and you're going to have an abundance of eggs, you have to feed them, you have to water them, keep them warm, protect them from predators. And there's not only a lot of paper cost to that, but human capital cost as well. You'll find that it's really cute and fun the first 30 days. And then after that, it becomes a small business. And as you know, most small businesses don't make a ton of money and they put a lot of hours in. So raising your own chickens may not be the solution to getting cheaper eggs, but at $2.20 a dozen, that's pretty good. I don't know where these knuckleheads get off saying they're spending, $10 a dozen on eggs. You can find them pretty much anywhere from $2 to $5 a dozen, and 5 is on the high end. And as far as gas goes, obviously gas prices have come down a little bit, but your national average is just above $3 a gallon, which isn't too bad considering how much work goes into fuel. Now, just to be completely transparent, there are outside influences that affect the price of things like fuel, like OPEC, basically the governing body of oil, and a lot of the Saudis who control a lot of the oil production. They can slow down production, which obviously raises prices. But if we were drilling and producing more of our own oil and our own energy, we could offset that. We actually have a lot of reserves that we could put out into the industry, into our economy, that could drop fuel substantially. And there's many other ways. Obviously, there's electric and lots of other things we're doing. But again, I encourage you guys to just educate yourselves, slow down, do a little bit of research, and don't listen to the media, because oftentimes these people are just trying to drive views. They're trying to get you all worked up. And it's truly amazing, some of the folks I've talked to lately, how much anxiety they have, whether it was the election, the left, the right, Republicans, Democrats, co-hosts on shows, getting people all riled up. And the reality is we live in the greatest country in the world. We have this free market that finds a way to correct itself, regardless of who's in office, regardless of what goes on, ups and downs, recessions, no recessions. I've lived through like 5 recessions, and I can tell you, I've seen the highs and lows. I've seen home values go way up and go way down. And at the end of the day, it all works itself out. You just got to be patient and live below your means. So what do you think? Does this make sense to you? If it does, please subscribe and share with your friends so we can teach you guys more about the products that we buy, sell, and train on. Till next time.